The dining room of the Vance estate always smelled of vanilla and expensive perfume, a scent that to this day makes my stomach churn. It was my 24th birthday, but there was no cake for me. Instead, there was a velvet-lined briefcase sitting in the center of the mahogany table, gleaming under the crystal chandelier. My father, Arthur Vance, cleared his throat, his posture rigid. "Juliana," he said, looking past me toward my younger sister, Clara. "Your mother and I have watched you grow into a brilliant young woman. We believe in your vision. This is the seed money for your legacy." With a dramatic flourish, he opened the briefcase. Inside lay neatly stacked bundles of $100 bills. "Exactly $1 million, Clara gasped, covering her mouth with manicured hands, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of triumph and greed. She didn't just look at the money, she looked at me, making sure I was watching her victory. "Thank you, Father. Thank you, Mother," Clara squealed, throwing her arms around them. "I promise Vance Cosmetics will be a global empire within 3 years." I sat frozen, my hands clenched in my lap. "Father," I started, my voice trembling. "What about the expansion plans I drew up for the family logistics business? The ones that could save us from the upcoming shipping crisis. You said we would discuss my funding today." My mother, Eleanor, sighed loudly, rolling her eyes as if my very voice was an inconvenience. "Oh, Maya, please. Don't be so inherently selfish. Your little logistics project is just data on a screen. Clara has star power. She is the face of this family's future. But I've worked at the firm for 4 years for pennies," I argued, standing up. "I gave up my master's degree to help keep your shipping lines afloat when the market dipped. Clara hasn't worked a day in her life. That is enough." Arthur's voice boomed, rattling the fine china. He stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You have done nothing but envy your sister since the day she was born. Your constant negativity and bitter attitude are a cancer in this household. We are tired of carrying your dead weight, Maya." "Dead weight," I echoed, a cold knot forming in my chest. "I run your entire back office operations." "Not anymore," my father said coldly. "As of this moment, you are terminated from Vance Logistics. And since you find this family so oppressive, you can find your own place to live. I want you out of this house by tomorrow morning." The room fell dead silent. Clara smirked from behind my mother's shoulder, a look of pure, unadulterated malice. "You're throwing me out," I whispered, looking at my mother, hoping for a shred of maternal instinct. Eleanor simply took a sip of her champagne. "It's time you learn some independence, Maya. Your jealousy is toxic." That night, I didn't cry. I packed my life into 2 battered suitcases and a cardboard box. As the sun rose over the manicured lawns of the estate, I walked down the long driveway alone. Behind me, the massive iron gates clicked shut, locking me out of the only world I had ever known. The first 6 months were a brutal lesson in survival. With no reference from my father and a sudden gap in my employment history, finding a high-level job in logistics was nearly impossible. I ended up renting a tiny, damp studio apartment above a noisy bakery in the industrial district of the city. The smell of burning flour replaced the scent of vanilla. I took a job as an entry-level dispatcher for a mid-sized, struggling courier company called Apex Freight. The pay was miserable, the hours were grueling, and my boss was a stressed-out man named Marcus who drank too much coffee. But while Clara was spending her $1 million throwing lavish launch parties for Vance Cosmetics, renting a penthouse office in downtown Manhattan, and hiring celebrity influencers, I was doing what I did best, analyzing data. I noticed that Apex Freight was losing thousands of dollars every week due to inefficient routing and poor fuel management. One night, staying late until 2 a.m., I rewrote the company's entire routing algorithm. I stayed up drinking stale coffee, mapping out a decentralized hub system that reduced delivery times by 35% and cut fuel costs in half. The next morning, I dropped the thick folder on Marcus's desk. He looked at it, then looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. "What is this, Maya?" "It's the reason your company won't go bankrupt next month," I said calmly. Marcus spent 3 hours reading my proposal. When he called me back into his office, his hands were shaking. "Where did you learn to do this?" "My father's company," I replied. "But they thought my data was just lines on a screen." Marcus offered me a partnership on the spot. No money up front, because he didn't have any, but a 30% equity stake in the company if my system worked. I accepted. Within a year, Apex Freight didn't just survive, it skyrocketed. Local businesses flocked to us because we were faster and cheaper than anyone else. I poured every ounce of my anger, my heartbreak, and my drive into the company. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a shield so that no one could ever throw me out into the cold again. Meanwhile, Clara's face was everywhere. She had become a social media sensation. Vance Cosmetics launched with a massive marketing blitz. Her brand was built on luxury, glittering packaging, and her own image as a self-made billionaire prodigy. My parents were ecstatic. Arthur poured the remaining reserves of Vance Logistics into Clara's company as secondary investments, convinced that her beauty empire was a golden goose that would fund their retirement. They completely severed ties with me, my emails were blocked, and my phone calls went straight to voicemail. To them, I was a ghost. One evening, while sitting in my new, spacious office at Apex, which had now grown to a fleet of 50 trucks, I watched a live television interview with Clara. The interviewer, a sharp-faced woman in a designer suit, asked, "Clara, you've achieved so much at such a young age. What is the secret to your success?" Clara smiled into the camera, her teeth blindingly white. "It's all about instinct and cutting out toxic energy. I've always been surrounded by people who believed in me, like my wonderful parents. I had to distance myself from people who tried to drag me down with their negativity." I knew exactly who she was talking about. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my green tea, and smiled. Let her fly high, I thought. The higher they fly, the harder they hit the ground. But as a data analyst, I started looking closer at Vance Cosmetics. Their marketing was flawless, but their supply chain was a disaster. They were sourcing their ingredients from cheap, unverified overseas manufacturers to maximize profit margins, and their shipping contracts were filled with predatory clauses. Clara was spending money like water on billboards and parties, but she wasn't paying her manufacturers on time. Her empire was a house of cards built on a foundation of unpaid debts and superficial hype. 2 years after I was thrown out, Apex Freight had rebranded as Apex Logistics Global. We had acquired 3 competitor companies and were now handling large-scale international supply chains. I was no longer the broke girl living above a bakery. I was a wealthy woman in my own right, respected in the industry for my sharp intellect and ruthless efficiency. One afternoon, my secretary buzzed my desk. "Ms. Vance, there is a gentleman here from Mirage Chemicals. He insists on speaking with you directly regarding an urgent supply chain acquisition." Mirage Chemicals was the primary supplier of the base ingredients for Vance Cosmetics. "Send him in," I said. A middle-aged man named Mr. Henderson walked in, looking pale and exhausted. He sat down and opened a folder. "Ms. Vance, I'll get straight to the point. Your company has the largest shipping network on the East Coast. We need to liquidate our shipping contracts and sell our warehouse assets immediately. We are facing a massive default." I leaned forward. "Who defaulted on you?" "Vance Cosmetics," Henderson said, spitting the name out like poison. "They owe us $4.2 million in manufacturing and raw material costs. They haven't paid their invoices in 6 months. Clara Vance keeps promising that their next product launch will cover it, but our auditors just checked their numbers. They are completely leveraged. They've been using new investor money just to pay off old credit card debts." My heart did a strange, rhythmic dance. It wasn't sadness, it was the cold thrill of anticipation. "What happens if you halt their shipments?" I asked. "If we stop supplying them, their upcoming holiday line won't launch. They've already taken millions in pre-orders from major retailers like Sephora and Target. If they fail to deliver, the retail giants will invoke their breach of contract penalties. It will bankrupt them within 30 days. I looked at the map of our shipping routes on my wall. "Mr. Henderson, I will buy out your warehouse assets and your shipping contracts today, in cash. But under one condition." "Anything," Henderson said desperately. "You will legally transfer all debt collection rights for Vance Cosmetics over to Apex Logistics." The downfall of Clara's empire didn't happen with a whimper, it happened with an atomic blast. It started with a rumor on Wall Street that Vance Cosmetics was facing supply chain issues. Within 48 hours, the rumors were confirmed when a massive shipment of their core ingredients was legally seized at the port, by my company, Apex Logistics. Without those ingredients, Clara's factories ground to a halt. The launch date for her highly anticipated holiday line passed with zero inventory shipped. The retail giants reacted instantly, issuing multi-million-dollar lawsuits for breach of contract. Panic set in. To save Clara's brand, my father did the ultimate foolish thing. He liquidated the entire cash reserve of Vance Logistics and took out a massive, high-interest predatory loan against the family estate to pay off Clara's immediate debts. But it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a paper umbrella. A week later, an investigative journalist broke a story revealing that Vance Cosmetics had been using cheap, unauthorized chemical substitutes in their lipsticks to cut costs, causing severe allergic reactions in hundreds of customers. The FDA stepped in, launching an immediate investigation. The brand became radioactive overnight. Influencers deleted their promotional videos. Retailers pulled the products from their shelves. The stock plummeted to zero. The million-dollar empire had completely collapsed. I sat in my high-rise office, looking out over the city skyline. It had been exactly 3 years since my parents threw me out. My phone rang. It was an unlisted number. I answered it. Maya Vance. There was a long, shaky pause on the other end. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in years spoke. It was cracked, old, and devoid of any pride. Maya, it's your father. I kept my voice perfectly flat, devoid of emotion. Arthur, to what do I owe the call? He winced at the use of his first name. Maya, please, we are in a desperate situation. The banks are foreclosing on the family house. Vance Logistics is bankrupt. Clara is facing potential criminal charges for fraud. We have nothing left. I know, I said simply. I've been tracking your financials for months. You knew. He gasped. Maya, we are family. Blood is thicker than water. I know we had our disagreements, but we are your parents. Your sister is falling apart. We heard about your success with Apex. Please, we need a loan of $5 million to settle the lawsuits and keep the house. For the sake of the family name. I let out a soft, dry laugh that cut through the phone line like a razor. When you gave Clara $1 million and threw me out on the street with 2 suitcases, did you think about family, Arthur? When mother called me a cancer and dead weight, did she think about blood being thicker than water? We made a mistake, Maya. We were blind, he pleaded, his voice breaking into a sob. Please, don't do this to us. I am a businesswoman, Arthur. I don't make emotional investments, I said coldly. However, I am willing to buy the Vance Logistics brand and its remaining physical assets. I will pay exactly enough to clear your personal debts so you don't go to prison. But the estate, the house, the cars, everything else belongs to the bank. And Clara will have to face the legal consequences of her actions alone. You want to buy my company for scraps? He whispered in horror. Take it or leave it, I replied. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, my offer drops by half. There was a long silence, followed by the sound of his defeated spirit breaking completely. Send the paperwork, he whispered. A month later, I stood on the porch of the Vance estate. The moving trucks were parked in the driveway, loading up the expensive furniture, the crystal chandeliers, and the oil paintings. The house had been foreclosed, and my parents were moving into a small, rented 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, ironically, just a few blocks away from the bakery where I had started my journey. Clara was inside, packing her designer clothes into cardboard boxes. The glamour was gone. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes were puffy from crying, and her name was a mockery in the business world. As she walked out of the front door carrying a heavy box, she stopped and looked at me. I was wearing a tailored Italian suit, my heels clicking sharply against the stone steps. Are you happy now? Clara spat, her voice full of venom. You ruined us. You engineered this whole thing just to get revenge. I walked down the steps until I was standing right in front of her. I looked down at her, feeling absolutely nothing, no anger, no hatred, just a profound sense of closure. I didn't ruin you, Clara, I said softly. You ruined yourself. Our parents handed you an empire on a silver platter, but you didn't know how to run it because you never learned how to build one. You thought money could buy competence. It can't. She opened her mouth to scream at me, but no words came out. She looked past me at the long driveway, realizing that no one was coming to save her this time. My parents walked out of the house next. My mother looked aged by 20 years. She wouldn't even look me in the eye. My father looked at me with a mixture of fear and deep regret. Maya, he started, his voice trembling. "Goodbye, Arthur. Goodbye, Eleanor," I said, stepping aside to let them pass. I watched them pack their lives into a cheap rental car and drive down the long driveway. As the car disappeared past the horizon, I walked over to the security panel by the front gates. With a simple code, I closed the massive iron gates, locking them out of the world they had lost. I turned around and looked at the beautiful, empty estate. I didn't need their $1 million. I didn't need their validation. I had built my own empire from the dirt up, and this time, no one could ever take it away from me.